Hi, welcome to the channel. This is Katrina and I am here today to start my summer seeds. I'm going to be showing you exactly how I create the soil for my seeds as well as what seeds I'm going to be growing. Now I employ the method that I always start seeds outside. Very rarely have I started seeds indoor, and usually those are a little bit of the plants that I have the most trouble with, which typically are tomatoes. In a future video, I will show you how I start my tomatoes indoors to give them the best boost ever, so that when you put them in the ground, they are ready to go. But for today, we're going to be working on summer seeds. I always start out my summer seeds with the seed mix. And what I have here is from Burpee. It's a seed starting mix. This seed starting mix is organic, naturally made. It is made from coconut coir. I particularly like the bricks, but you can find them in these little pods. I think they're called pellets. So what we start with is I just open the bag and I get my 5-gallon bucket. If you do not have 5-gallon buckets, you have to have these. They're like a gardener's dream. And so I put my brick in my bucket. I'm going to fill this bucket up to about halfway with water, and I'm going to let it kind of sit in the sun. They typically like you to start these with warm water, but I'm going to start with cold water and just set it out in the sun and leave it be for like 30 minutes. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to take my soil. This is the soil I use around my garden, kind of top off my beds when they start to get low, which is black cow. Everybody, I think, knows about black cow, but if you don't, black cow is an excellent soil to use if you are using it as like the top layer of compost. If you're filling a bed, which once again, we'll have a video later that shows how to fill a bed, I wouldn't necessarily use this to fill the entire bed. One, it's a little expensive. Two, it holds on to moisture so much, I feel like the beds would become waterlogged. So instead, I usually top the top 2 or 3 inches with something like this, or with a compost that you can get online. But for seed starting, I like to put this in there, probably at a ratio of 75% coconut coir, 25% of the black cow. And then I usually use this seed cell tray, which is a 72 tray. As you can see, the cells are quite small. I think that's like maybe 2 inches deep. I like to start them this way. I monitor my seeds like you wouldn't believe. I'm out here checking them sometimes 2 times a day. But even if you only check them once or twice a day, I think you can usually get about 2 weeks for most plants, unless they're really slow growing. But for most plants, you can usually get 2 weeks, which gets them started. And then I can up pot them into a 3-inch, 4-inch cell tray, or straight into the garden, which a lot of the time is what I do. Once I put the soil in these, we'll put the seeds in them, and then I'll show you what I do next. So I'm going to start with that amount of water, which is a little less than what I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to go set it in a sunny area just so it can absorb all that water. I'll come and check on it in about 30 minutes, and if it looks too dry, I'll add a little bit more water. You want it to be like a coarse crumble. So while we wait for our seed starting mix to be ready, I wanted to show you some of the varieties that I'm going to be growing this summer. Now, some of these items I have grown every year, very successful, but a lot of them I am trying a bunch of new things. So I wanted to show them to you. I've kind of sectioned them off by types. So my first set is my leafy greens, which is quite difficult to grow in summer because of our heat, but I have gotten a few, I'm not sure how you pronounce these, but I'm gonna go with Sokina Savio and Tokyo Bekina. These, I believe, are types of like Chinese cabbage that do well this time of year. And then I have 2 types of lettuce, Manaho and Jericho romaine. So I'm going to give these a shot again. Besides the leafy greens, I am doing a whole bunch of peppers. Hot peppers do so well this time of year, and I have big plans for cowboy candy and chili powder and making my own taco mix. So I have Azur Delis, Cubanella, pimento peppers, your early jalapenos, a Yolo sweet wonder pepper, and then a large red cherry pepper. I'm also trying to go really heavy on the beans. Most of the year in my garden, I plant fruiting plants and root crops, and so I want to give the soil a little bit of the extra nutrients it needs, and peas and beans are a perfect way to do that. Now, a lot of people say you should use one of these inoculants for your beans, and sometimes I do. I haven't really seen a huge difference between using it and not using it, but better be safe than sorry. But I plan on doing Izuco beans because I absolutely love them. They're a little red bean. They grow great in the summer. I've done them every year. Puerto Rican black beans, which is a pole bean or a trellising bean, and it is super productive and it grows a ton amount in a single plant. I'm going to be trying a Whippoorwill cowpea. Cowpeas do really great during the summer. They do need to be trellised, just like the Puerto Rican black bean. I'm going to be trying Jackson Wonder lima beans. I'm not sure how they're gonna go. I haven't had the most success with just typical beans, but I hear that lima beans are similar to cowpeas and how they do during our summers. I'm going to be trying a Mayflower bean, and then I have a couple more of the Izuco beans from one of my favorite ones, M.I. Gardner. So besides that, I am also going to be doing a couple of randoms. I got this 42-day tomato, which I'm really curious about. In Florida, it's very difficult to grow tomatoes during the summer, with the exception of Everglades tomatoes, which I have out there, and I'm happy with those. But I wanted to see about growing a larger cherry tomato, and so I'm going to try this 42-day. It is April right now, late April, so I'm hoping that by it being a very fast maturing tomato plant that it might do okay in the early part of the summer. And then a couple ones that are new to me, these are from Whitwam Organics, is the new Kadua carrot. It's a tropical carrot, so we're gonna see. It's under his heat-loving greens and things section where you can buy those, and an icebox watermelon, also heat-loving green. Now I suspect the watermelon's gonna get powdery mildew, so I am starting it sooner than later so that way it has the best chance of survival. For the first time ever, I'm going to try to grow a grain. I have not grown a grain other than amaranth, which had great success. Plants got super big. The yield was not great, but I hear that's pretty typical with any kind of grain crop. But long grain rice, I have heard, grows really well here as long as you flood the container that they're going to be in. So these guys are not going to be in my beds. They're going to be in containers that do not have drainage holes. I know, it sounds crazy. All of our plants should have draining holes. But the long grain rice does really well when it has an excessive amount of water. So we'll see how this one goes, but I bought quite a bit of seed for that because I have several large containers that I'm going to use. If you haven't noticed from my last videos, I am in love with squash. All squash, particularly winter squash. I love the storage life. I love the way it tastes. I use it in everything. I basically use it to substitute any kind of potato, even though I do grow my own white potatoes and sweet potatoes. But the one that I'm really excited about is Seminole pumpkins. I've never grown these, but I've seen so many people with tremendous success, especially in summer. I'm gonna try a summer squash, but it's gonna be the little scallop, the early white bush scallop. I'm hoping that because they're small that I can get a few off of this before the powdery mildew and the squash vine borers and everything else get to it. And then of course there's an early prolific straight neck summer squash. I've had success with this in the past. Usually I grow it a little bit earlier, but we're gonna give it a shot. And then, oh, this one made it into the wrong section. This is actually part of the beans and peas. But this is a Texas cream cowpea as well, so I'm gonna give that one a try. And then Cushaw squash, they live in the same family as the Seminole pumpkin. So I am thinking that they would be similar in terms of how they handle the heat and the humidity. If you ever get a chance, definitely look up the different types of squashes. I believe there's 4 main types, and there's some that do really well down here. So next up is what's gonna go in my green stalks. And now this isn't all of what's gonna go in my green stalks. I usually grab a couple of these and put them in my green stalks as well, because I like to try different methods. So sometimes in a bed, sometimes in a container, sometimes in my green stalk, sometimes just straight in the ground. But I'm gonna do an Italian large leaf basil. I have a ton of lemon balm, but it's living in my garden bed and it's taking over like a mint family would do. So I'm gonna try to get that in my green stalk. And I love red vein sorrel. It's a lemony herb. You can put it in your salads. You can put it on fish. I think it is just an underrated herb. Next up, I have my flowers. I have not been a huge flower person, but I'm trying to get better at it. My bees really like my flowers whenever I do grow them, and so I want to give them more so that they remember and come back here year over year. So I'm doing a short step sunflower. I'm doing a Chief Celestia, not sure. And my gardener sent me a free sunflower mix, so I'm gonna give that mix a try. I'm gonna do a lemon queen, and then I'm gonna do some zinnias, because I hear that they grow very well down here as well. And then last but not least, in case my leafy greens don't go so well, I do have an arrow garden inside, which we will do a video very shortly about how to use an arrow garden. But I'm using that arrow garden to grow some of my favorite leafy greens. It will not keep up with our salad needs. We eat salad almost every day. But it will supplement, so I'm not buying as much from the grocery store. This one is endive. I just really love the crunchy, curly nature of the leaf. And then this one is just a random salad bowl mix. I don't get really particular on my arrow garden when it comes to heat tolerant, because it's inside the house and we keep our house at like 70 to 72 degrees, and these guys just do fine. So you can pretty much grow whatever lettuce variety you like. I do try to keep it to a loose leaf lettuce or a butter crunch lettuce, just because it tends to grow better in the green stalk in terms of height. Because I just have a six pod one. And so you have to think about the height of these plants. So a romaine, an iceberg, the width around of an iceberg doesn't work so well, and the romaines get super tall. So I try to stick with some of those more shorter loose leaf varieties, but they don't have to be heat tolerant. So this is what I'm gonna be growing in my garden. I probably have a few more because I have a seed addiction. I buy from all different places. I'll put some of the links in the description of some of the places that I buy from, particularly their areas of their website that have really good varieties for Florida. Hi, and so we are back, and we have all of our coconut coir has now dissolved, and it has become that coarse crumble that I was talking about. I really didn't have to add any extra water, which is cool. It was the perfect amount. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some nutrients to it. Now I have some old seed starting mix that I didn't use, so the first thing I'm gonna do is dump that in there. You don't obviously have to do this. I generally use all of my seed starting mix when I start new soil, but on occasion I have some leftovers, so I just go ahead and use that. And so I'm just kind of mixing it in so that the coconut coir and that old seed starting mix get mixed in together. And it was also the same combination of coconut coir and black cow. Okay, so now we're gonna get some of this black cow. And we're just gonna crumble it up and put it in our bucket. And this makes quite a bit of seed starting mix, which I don't know about you, but I start a lot of seeds. Some because I like having multiple plants and I plant them in different places. I'm one of those intercroppers. So I mix my plants up because I like the ecosystem that it creates. I like that, you know, some plants for companions are mixed in together. Some plants are helpful when it comes to bugs, so I like to mix those in. And like I said earlier, I'm going to get into more flowers, so those are going to be mixed in as well. I also, and a little tip here, is whatever amount of plants you want to grow. So say you want to grow 4 tomato plants. You think that's about the amount that you will use. And there's lots of different charts out there that show you how many plants are needed per person to feed a family of 4 or a family of 2 like mine. And so you would think, okay, I just need to grow 4 cells of tomato plants. Well, I always double because there's always loss. There's loss in the seed stage, there's loss in the seedling stage, and there's loss at adult plants when you've been infested with something, some sort of bug or fungus. So now what I'm gonna do is take my seed starting mix. Got a little bug there. And I'm just gonna start pouring it on the trays. I do this outside because, as you can see, it's a pretty messy job. I like to get my hands in the dirt. This would be not very cool in my kitchen. So I'm gonna come all the way to the edges of the seed cell trays. I don't want to lose any of my good soil, so I'm kind of having my hand there to keep it from falling off into the ground, so I don't lose any of that good stuff. Now what I do is not heavily, but I kind of pack it down just a tiny bit. You want some aeration for your seeds, but I find this mix is so aerated that sometimes it makes it difficult for the plants, and you know, they kind of outgrow the seed cell trays pretty quickly if I don't do a little bit of packing down. And I'm not pressing very hard at all. I'm just kind of taking a couple fingers, like 2 or 3 fingers, depending on how tiny your hands are, like mine. And I'm just pushing those down a little bit to see where I have a decent amount of drop in that soil. And there's some cells that got packed very nicely, and there's other cells, particularly the ones in the corners, as you can see, that didn't get packed down well. So now I'm just going to take a little bit of soil, and here is where I'm not going to pack down. I'm just going to just slide it across until those cells are filled all the way to the rim. Lot on this side. Apparently I did not put enough dirt, but that's okay. That is okay, because you can always add more. Okay. There we go. And so your seed starting trays should look like this when you're done. So we're now filled up our seed starting tray, and we're back in the kitchen, and we're going to put our seeds in, label them, and then we're gonna mist them with water. And then I'm actually just gonna go set them right outside into the garden. No cover, because this time of year, I don't think you necessarily need the humidity that the cover, the little plastic cover, provides. In fact, they'll actually cook underneath that cover because of the amount of heat that we have. So I'm not going to put the cover on. Typically I do the cover around winter, fall, and sometimes early spring. But for our summer crops, I'm just going to have to be really diligent about watering them properly. So we're going to put all these seeds in, and then we'll get them misted and outside. Now that we have all of our seeds in there, I'm going to, hi Chloe, I'm going to mist this with the mister that I have on top of my, hose head here. I can't remember what they're called for the life of me. But I mist so that some of my smaller seeds don't get washed away and my bigger seeds get enough moisture. Because the smaller your seed is, the easier it is to wash away. The bigger the seed is, the further it needs to go down. It's a good rule of thumb that the smaller seed goes to the depth it is big, and the larger seeds go to the depth that they are big. So if you have a bean seed that is about that size, it needs to go that deep in the ground. Same with your smaller seeds. In fact, some smaller seeds need to just be pressed onto the top, and you might have seen that during the time-lapse video there, that I just kind of pressed them into the top so that they would adhere to the soil because they were just so tiny. Another thing you might have noticed is that you didn't see all my seeds that we walked through, and that's because some of them are just better at direct seeding, and some of them I like to start in the green stalk, and so I don't have to create trays for them. So this is pretty moist. This should last me about, I would say 2 days. I shouldn't have to mist it again. And then another thing that I'd like to mention is these trays are great because they can collect water underneath here, which can be a benefit, but it also can be bad. So if I'm expecting a lot of rain, I will actually remove these little inserts from the tray, because otherwise the tray will accumulate water underneath in the bottom, and it will cause water to accumulate up top if I know it's going to rain. If I don't know it's going to rain, or I'm just being careful, I'll actually remove them from the trays. But I know we've got like a whole week of not a drop of rain, so I'm misting really well. And then we're going to go place them in a spot in just a second. So this is one of my favorite spots in the garden to actually start seeds, because once the sun gets a little bit higher, these plants right here will shade this and keep it from drying out too much. Another thing is when the morning sun comes up, I have a privacy fence, and so it will block. So it's really only getting probably about 4 or 5 hours of sun a day, which is plenty for seeds. Seeds don't need that much. They need a little bit, and they need the heat because I'm doing a lot of hot peppers, and the hot peppers like warmth to germinate. So I'm going to leave them here, and I'm just going to check on them every couple days and see how they're doing. If they feel like they're drying out too quickly, I might move them to a more shady spot. I have a couple other areas of the garden that I can put seed trays. As we progress further into summer and it gets really hot and that sun is really beating down, I stop using my beds as a place to put seeds, and I actually have a place where next to my green stalks where it has a significant amount of shade so that they don't get overheated. But for now, we're gonna start here. We're gonna see how they do, and in a couple days, if it looks like they keep drying out, I'll move them over to the other spot. But that's about it. Our seeds are started for summer. So if you found this video helpful, make sure to do a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. We're gonna have our next video coming up in just a few days, and we're gonna talk about seed saving. So stay tuned for that.